My name is Lauren Lubin. I am not male. I am not female. I am a third gender. I am here to tell you today that there are more than just two genders. In fact, there is an entire spectrum. Cultures all over the world have always recognized this truth. From hundreds of Native American tribes to dozens of countries around the world. It is about time that we have caught up with them and remember what our ancestors once knew. Once you hear this story, I promise you will never look at gender the same way. I'm working on a documentary, Gender Blender, that shines a spotlight into the lives of those who exist outside the gender binary or who may be transgender, such as myself. People like myself have very little space in our society and even less in our media. However, we exist everywhere, and we all share similar stories. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself and how I ended up dedicating my life to this project and this cause. Growing up, I had a talent for basketball. I pursued my career all the way through college, where I earned a full scholarship at the University of Colorado and obtained just about everything that society led me to believe would make me happy, though I wasn't. While I was in college, I earned major achievements and earned everything that I thought would bring me happiness. But I wasn't. So why wasn't I happy? As far back as I can remember, I realized that there wasn't a space for me to fully exist. Growing up with such a talent, I knew that I either had to play completely with the boys in basketball while undergoing scrutiny, or I had to struggle to fit in with the girls. I wasn't happy because I didn't naturally fit into any label that I knew existed, because I didn't know that there's anything outside of being either pink or blue. And I desperately tried to fit in. Yep, that is me. I wore dresses. I put on makeup. I wore heels that I could not walk in. It was awkward. And because of this, because of how unhappy I was, I knew that I had to look within. I knew that I had to figure out what would make me happy. Because after all, I did achieve many of those benchmarks that society led me to believe would bring me happiness and fulfillment. But there was a complete disconnect between who I was and how I lived my life. So fortunately for me, my friend Kevin called me out of the blue and told me that he was building a tree house in the middle of Costa Rica and invited me to come stay with him, which is your typical Tuesday conversation. At the time, I didn't know what was holding me back from my happiness, but I knew that something was there. And I knew that I would have to separate myself from it if I ever wanted to break free from its holds on me. I was living in New York at the time. I dropped everything. I left everything and everyone, and within a matter of a week, I was on a single-engine plane with my Boston Terrier, 1 week's worth of clothes, destined for the middle of the rainforest. I remember thinking at the time that this was either the best or quite possibly the craziest decision I have ever made in my life. I initially intended to go for just a short visit, and that short visit turned into 2 years. So there I was, transplanted from the concrete jungle all the way to the middle of the real jungle. I was miles away from any type of civilization. At this moment, any sense of myself, anything that I ever valued, was gone. I lived in a structure that had no windows, no electricity, no refrigeration, not even a single mirror. It was only when I was able to disconnect from the society I knew that I was really able to look within. I had no other choice. Immediately, the layers of myself began to strip away. I became my biggest student, yet also my greatest teacher. I fiercely observed myself and the world around me. I wrote for hours upon hours, days, weeks, and months without any intention of anyone ever reading these intimate writings of mine. Until that one day came. Kevin and I knew it was important to get out of town and take a break from jungle living every once in a while. So we drove 2 hours north to a small surf town called Dominical. We ate at an actual restaurant for the first time in what felt like forever. We had dry sheets at our hostel and electricity. And honestly, the combination of those three things felt like ultimate luxury. We ended up talking late into the night, sitting on a beach next to a campfire. And before we called it a night, I had the brilliant idea to go for a quick skinny dip. That quick skinny dip turned into 2 hours of us swimming for our lives as we got caught in a riptide that dragged us out to sea. I honestly have no idea how we made it out of that ocean. And I've never had such a profound experience with death. And that night, I accepted death. And because I accepted death, I was also able to accept life. For days afterward, I cried. I was shaken, yet profoundly grateful. And we made a pact with each other then and there that from this moment on, we would only live a life of service. So for me, that began with publishing my writings in the form of 2 books. I knew that I had to share the knowledge that I had learned in the jungle with any other person who was also searching for their own truth. But most importantly, I knew I could no longer be denied. I finally decided to allow my true nature. And because of all the work I had done within while writing these 2 books, I was able to fully understand and accept my true gender identity, and also see through the layers that had been placed upon me by society. I woke up, and Kevin and I, then and there, decided to commit ourselves to connecting and helping others like myself. Thus, Gender Blender was born. And I was ready to return home to sweet home Chicago because I knew that this message was too important not to be shared. So why is this message so important? Transgender people and those who exist outside the gender binary have attempted suicide rates between 40 and 60% compared to the 1.6% for our general population. This community is consistently ignored, is subject to widespread discrimination, and has one of the highest abuse rates of any other demographic. Put simply, we do not exist. We do not exist in most bathrooms and changing rooms. We do not exist in the media. We do not exist in official government paperwork. We do not exist in academia at large, nor in most literature. We have become invisible. This dire situation is the driving force behind this big idea. We wish to be visible once again. We wish to tell our stories and to no longer be silenced. It is only through this conversation that we can allow a space for us to grow. And this is the conversation behind this film. Gender Blender gives an intimate view into the lives of those, the challenges, the triumphs, and the everyday experiences of those who exist outside the gender binary. This film is unique. It is the first of its kind to fully document a transition, not from male to female, and not from female to male, but from female to gender neutral, my gender identity. Consequently, it'll follow my life before and after I undergo a double mastectomy, also known as top surgery, so I can finally feel comfortable in my own skin and be who I am. For people like myself, this step is necessary and life-saving. Unfortunately, it is a step that is difficult to attain due to costs and societal restraints. But such empowering footage is exactly what people like myself need to see. They need to see their own self for once. They need to hear their own story being heard. And they need to know that it is finally safe for them to take the proper steps necessary for them to live a life that's congruent to them, even if it may be perceived as different today. And everything that I'm talking about shares so many similarities to our ongoing acceptance of homosexuality. Let me remind you that it was only as recently as 1990 when the World Health Organization finally declassified homosexuality as a mental illness. It is only through taking a stand where any change can be made. But luckily and thankfully for us, we are not alone. Progress has been made. Countries such as Brazil, Australia, India, Bangladesh, Canada, and many parts of Europe are now working to pass legislative rights in favor of transgender people. An example of this is there's an ongoing movement in both the UK and in Canada to remove the terms female and male off of any passport applications and the actual passports themselves, because there's really no need for them to be on there. In the US, a growing number of health insurance companies are starting to cover gender reassignment surgeries such as my own, as well as the mental health profession is really done great numbers to reduce the stigmatism from transgender from the upcoming DSM-5, which is considered the Bible for the mental health field. And although there is still a long way to go, the federal government is starting to recognize and support transgender rights and pass legislation in that favor. And lastly, oppression is something that I have known. And I've always said, never underestimate the power of the oppressed, because they may be perceived as small and docile, but even if they see the smallest crack of light, they will pick up a sledgehammer and they will take that wall down. And so I'm here to say that this stage is one of those cracks, and you are part of this light, and together we can work on taking down these walls. Thank you.